Christmas is a construct, an accumulation of centuries of religious marketing, cultural appropriation, and political convenience. The idyllic image we have today, snow, peace, gifts, and a sacred birth, is a recent varnish over a reality that is much cruder, chaotic, and often violent. If we scratch the golden surface, we don't find singing angels. We find drunken Romans, Norse gods demanding blood, and a pope with a brilliant strategy to control the masses. Let's start with the foundational lie, the calendar. December 25th is not anyone's birthday. Historically, it is impossible. Biblical texts describe shepherds sleeping in the open with their flocks. In first-century Judea, December is a month of freezing rains and biting cold. No shepherd with half a brain would leave their sheep out in the elements in winter. Livestock is kept indoors. If the herds were outside, it was spring or summer. Jesus of Nazareth was not born in winter. The date was chosen deliberately to cover up something bigger. In 4th century Rome, December was not a time for silence and prayer. It was the month of Saturnalia, the wildest pagan festival in the empire. For a week, the social order was inverted. Slaves wore masters' clothes. Money was gambled in public. Wine was drunk until comas set in, and the streets were a carnival of excess. And the grand finale arrived on December 25th, the Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, the birth of the unconquered sun. The day the sun began to gain ground against the night. Christianity was growing, but it couldn't compete with a party where everything was permitted. Pope Julius I understood he couldn't prohibit the fun. People weren't going to give up their feasts. So, he opted for assimilation. He decreed that Christ's birth would be celebrated on the same day as the birth of the sun. It was a perfect political maneuver. They kept the date, they kept the feasts, but they changed the host's name. Where they once toasted to Saturn and the sun, now they toasted to the Messiah. Christmas wasn't born in a manger. It was born in a papal office in Rome to eclipse a solar cult. But Rome wasn't the only source of cultural looting. If we look north, we find the origin of our most iconic rituals. The Christmas tree is a Germanic intruder. For the tribes of northern Europe, the entire universe was a tree, Yggdrasil, the immense ash tree connecting the 9 worlds. During the winter solstice, these people didn't put a pine in their living room for aesthetics. They decorated sacred oaks in dark forests to ask the gods for life to return. And those rituals often included animal and human sacrifices hanging from the branches. The Christianization of this custom was violent. Enter Saint Boniface, an 8th century missionary who didn't believe in intercultural dialogue. The legend tells that he arrived in the region of Hesse in Germany and found a tribe worshiping the thunder oak, consecrated to Thor. Boniface didn't preach. He grabbed an axe and chopped down the sacred tree in front of everyone. The oak fell, and according to the story the church tells us, it crushed everything around it except a small fir tree. Boniface pointed to the surviving fir with its triangular shape and evergreen needles and declared that this would be the new symbol. The wood of the pagan idol was used to build a chapel. The modern Christmas tree is born from an act of religious destruction, from an axe severing the connection with the old gods to impose a new one. And it's not the only plant with a dark past. Mistletoe, under which we feign romance today, has an origin stained with divine blood in Norse mythology. It has nothing to do with romantic love. It has to do with murder. The legend says the goddess Frigg extracted promises from every being in creation not to harm her son Balder, the god of light. But she ignored the mistletoe. It seemed too insignificant. Loki, the god of deception, seized the error. He crafted an arrow with the parasitic plant and tricked Balder's blind brother into shooting it. The god of light fell dead, pierced by the branch his mother despised. Mistletoe is not a symbol of kissing. It is the murder weapon in the North's most famous deicide. The tradition of kissing underneath it is a late reinterpretation to whitewash the image of a cursed plant that killed the sun. Christmas has always been a battlefield. There were times when the celebration got so out of hand, it had to be banned by law. We aren't talking about a metaphorical war. In the 17th century, in England and the American colonies, Christmas was declared illegal. The Puritans, led by Oliver Cromwell, viewed the holiday as a papist abomination full of pagan excesses. For them, there was no biblical basis for the party. The English Parliament passed laws fining anyone who celebrated December 25th. Soldiers patrolled the streets of London, confiscating food prepared for feasts. Churches were padlocked that day. Shops were forced to open. In Boston, the ban lasted 22 years. Celebrating Christmas was a criminal offense. People had to hide their pies and sing in whispers inside their homes, fearing a neighbor might report them to the authorities. The image of happy families eating turkey was, for decades, an act of clandestine resistance against a fundamentalist government that hated joy. But if there is one figure who has undergone a grotesque transformation, it is the patron of the feast himself, Santa Claus. Before being a giant elf dressed by Coca-Cola, he was a real person, and he looked nothing like the doll we know. Nicholas of Bari lived in the 4th century in what is now Turkey. He wasn't a lovable old man. He was a dogmatic bishop, thin, with weather-beaten skin and scars from Roman persecution. He had a temper. Historical records suggest that during the Council of Nicaea, Nicholas became so enraged by the heresies of Arius that he crossed the room and punched him in the face in front of Emperor Constantine. That is the real Nicholas, a man capable of assaulting another clergyman over a theological dispute. The legend of his generosity is born of desperation, not magic. The most famous story tells that a ruined father had no money for his 3 daughters' dowries. Without a dowry, the fate of women in that era was slavery or prostitution. Nicholas, learning of the impending tragedy, went to the house at night. He didn't come down the chimney. He threw bags of gold through the open window so the father could marry off his daughters. The bags supposedly fell inside some stockings drying by the fire. That is where the tradition of stockings comes from. It isn't a cute decoration. It is the memory of a nocturnal bribe to save 3 women from human trafficking. The path from that angry Turkish bishop to the jolly fat man of the North Pole is long and strange. It involves mergers with alpine demons, one-eyed gods, and 19th century political cartoonists. But the true mutation, the one that gave us modern Santa, didn't happen in the northern ice, but at desks in New York and marketing labs. And in that process, the darkest and most fascinating parts of the story were lost. The Krampus, St. Nicholas's demonic companion who beat bad children with birch branches, was erased. The fear rituals were erased. modern Christmas has been sanitized, packaged, and sold, hiding the fact that originally these dates were about surviving the darkness, appeasing invisible forces, and remembering the dead. If the origin of Santa Claus is a Turkish bishop who gave away gold to prevent prostitution, how on earth did we end up with an old man living in the North Pole with flying reindeer? The answer isn't magic. It is cheap literature and an aggressive advertising campaign. The image of Santa Claus did not evolve naturally. It was manufactured. In the 19th century, New York was full of Dutch immigrants celebrating Sinterklaas. He was a serious, religious figure, but writers of the time saw an opportunity. In 1823, an anonymous poem was published, A Visit from St. Nicholas. This text is ground zero for the modern lie. The poem took the holy bishop, stripped him of his mitre, stripped him of his dignity, and shrank him. It described him as a jolly old elf. It gave him a sleigh and 8 reindeer with names. Suddenly, St. Nicholas stopped being a patron of sailors and became a magical gnome. It was a complete literary reinvention, ignoring 1,500 years of ecclesiastical history. But a key piece was missing: the aesthetic. For decades, Santa Claus was drawn in every which way. Sometimes he was tall, sometimes a gnome. Sometimes he wore green, blue, or even brown. There was no canon. Until Thomas Nast arrived, a political cartoonist from the American Civil War. Nast drew Santa for the cover of Harper's Weekly. He gave him the red suit, the prominent belly, and the pipe. But most importantly, he gave him a postal address. Nast decided Santa lived at the North Pole. Why? Because at that time, the Arctic was a mysterious, unexplored place, a no-man's land. It was the perfect spot so no one could go and check if it was true. The North Pole is a geographic lie, invented to avoid awkward questions from children. And now, the Coca-Cola myth. You've surely heard it. Santa wears red because Coca-Cola invented him. False. That is an urban legend that has been too successful. When Coca-Cola started using Santa in their ads in the 1930s, the character had already been wearing red for 50 years in Nast's illustrations and on postcards. Coca-Cola didn't create Santa. They simply standardized his image. They hired illustrator Haddon Sundblom, who gave him that rosy, grandfatherly, bubbly look we know. What the brand did was take a folkloric figure and turn him into the ultimate corporate mascot. Santa isn't a Coca-Cola invention, but he is their best employee. Let's talk about the reindeer, specifically the outcast. Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer. The story tells us it is a classic tale about acceptance and overcoming odds. The reality is much more cynical. Rudolph does not come from folklore. He was born in a marketing department. In 1939, the department store chain Montgomery Ward wanted to save money. Every year, they bought coloring books to give to children at Christmas. They decided it would be cheaper to create their own story in-house. They tasked a copywriter named Robert May to write something. May invented Rudolph. It was a pure corporate assignment to sell more during the holiday season. The red nose isn't magic, it is copyright. And if you think leaving milk and cookies is an innocent gesture of gratitude, think again. It is a vestige of fear. In Norse mythology, Odin led the wild hunt during the winter, riding across the sky on his 8-legged horse, Sleipnir. Seeing the wild hunt was an omen of death or war. Children left hay and sugar in their boots for Sleipnir, hoping Odin would pass by and not take anyone from the house. In return, Odin left gifts or sweets. The milk and cookies you leave on the table are not a gift for Santa. They are a ritual bribe, so a powerful deity doesn't destroy your home. We have turned a protection ritual against death into a midnight snack. Modern Christmas is a cultural Frankenstein. We have taken the Roman Saturnalia to have an excuse to drink and eat. We have stolen the tree from the Germanic pagans. We have turned a Turkish bishop into an Arctic elf and a mythological horse into flying reindeer created by department stores. Everything we celebrate is a mix of ancient fears and modern consumerism. But you know what? Maybe that is what makes it indestructible. Christmas isn't a historical truth. It is a human necessity. We need light in the middle of winter. We need to believe that generosity can fall from the sky, even if it is a lie. The real story is full of blood, bans, and marketing, yes. But the party is still here. We survived the Puritans who banned it and the brands that bought it. In the end, it doesn't matter if Jesus was born in summer or if Santa is a soda ad. What matters is that for a few days, we collectively decide to ignore the darkness, turn on some absurd lights, and pretend the world is a better place. And that is probably the only truth worth keeping from this whole mess. Merry Christmas, or whatever you are actually celebrating.